Our story starts with Daeun and Bidna at the scene where the blood is the only thing left. Meanwhile, the head detective So-young is missing. The police starts the investigation and the chief abandoned Daeun's team because they can't be impartial due to their emotional state. Daeun tells Bidna he is optimistic, determined to find So-young. He meets Dae, who is totally collapsed. He hugs her, comforting and consoling her. Daeun is given a copy of the serial killer details that So-young was holding onto without telling Daeun. Meanwhile, Bidna is in her office worrying about Daeun. She finds herself concerned about Daeun. She tries to use her magic mirror to check if So-young is alive or dead, but she stops as she tries to convince herself that she will be alive. The CEO Won-jung is claiming that Mr. Won was a gambler and used the strike as a way of extorting money to pay off his debts. Daeun and Bidna meet up with Mr. Won's co-worker, whom agrees to be a witness that's willing to testify against the CEO. At the courtroom, the witness shows up an hour later than expected and very clearly has been paid off, as he says that Mr. Won threatened the CEO with the strike to extort money. Daeun follows the witness outside, but the man keeps apologizing. Bidna is invited for dinner by Jae-gul's family. She asks Won-jung's father how he fabricated gambling evidence. He answers that everyone is vulnerable to money. Arang meets Bidna and reveals that she has found the only survivor of serial killer Jae is Daeun. Daeun meets up with Bidna, encouraging her to do her best in the CEO's case. At the courtroom, Bidna gives the CEO sentencing with 1 year in prison, 2 years of probation and 40 hours of community service. The family pleads her, but Bidna keeps the poker face, although she was deeply affected. The chief tells Bidna about her sentencing that there are more malicious and hates comments online, but Bidna doesn't care about it. Yoo-jeong, Mr. Won's daughter, is brought into hospital. The doctor warns her mother should prepare for the worst. However, Yoo-jeong unexpectedly wakes up and her vitals suddenly start getting better. The doctor says it's a miracle and pointing out that someone is sponsoring her treatment. It's revealed that the Hell cleanup crew is the sponsor. Ridiculously, Won-jung goes to the church to thank God for standing by his side. Meanwhile, he receives a call, a girl mocking him, provoking him to come to an amusement park. It seems the Hell game starts. Daeun's team undercover watching Won-jung. Meanwhile, Daeun knows Bidna will Won-jung. He meets her. He pleads her not to do it as he doesn't want to arrest her. Bidna tells him what if Won-jung is the serial killer who slaughtered his family and he cannot bring the killer back to the trail as the statute is expired. He hugs her tightly and thanks her for telling him that it's not his fault that his family is killed. Bidna is heart-touched and leaves before being so emotional. Back to the amusement park where the exciting events are happening, Won-jung finds a scary clown approaching him. Meanwhile, a row injects him and he faints. He wakes up at the golf center where Bidna smashing balls into him. She gives him a taste of his medicine. She leaves him run away where a bus hits him and then finding himself is hanged in the forest. Bidna appears and asks if he admits his sins, but he doesn't repent. She summons the Hell monsters chasing him. He hides in the Ferris wheel, but she pops up and beats him brutally. She eventually stabs him with her magic purple knife, sending him to Hell and of course branding his forehead. Unfortunately, Daeun records the whole events because he hugged her. He put a bug on her jacket. She gets furious and demands the phone, but he throws sulfur powder on her. It's revealed that Mondo tells him that sulfur powder stops demon superpowers for 1 or 2 hours. Whilst he arrests her, he received a call that head detective So-young is found. He leaves and tied Bidna to Ferris wheel. Daeun arrives in the crime scene. He finds So-young's dead body and the mark of the killer, a big letter J on the floor next to her. He remembers his parents' murder scene and So-young was the first person arrived. Found Daeun was scared in his room. She promised him she will become a great detective and catch the killer. At the police station, there was no relatives for Daeun and he was about to send to the orphanage when she decided to adopt him. At present, after a while, Bidna retrieves her superpowers and breaks her handcuffs. She finds herself meets Daeun again, who returns. He smashes his phone on the ground. He asks her to kill the serial killer, Jae, sending him to Hell. He wants to rip him to shreds, but she refuses, saying if he kills him he will send him Hell too. However, Daeun doesn't care. He promises her that he gladly will let her kill him. She smiles and agrees, but when she turns around she suddenly starts crying and sheds tears whilst she is shocked.